Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of Veterinary Profession Podcast with IVSA Iskoka and Iskovi. Today with us we have Dr. Cindry Trice. She is the Chief Veterinary Officer at Hound and Relief Veterinarian with the experience of around 18 years, and her saying already said that she has successfully morphed her curiosity and fear of commitment into the career as a professional sampler. Welcome Dr. Cindry Trice.
Thank you so much for having me, Sushan. I'm super excited to be here.
So, although I have already asked you a question, but I like to ask you again to say your name, surname, and where did you finish your university, and the short description of your work history to the viewers.
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Cindry Trice, and I did my veterinary degree at University of California, Davis. I graduated in 2004, and right when I graduated, I did an internship program at a small animal specialty and emergency center. So I did a rotating internship, and ended up doing general practice after that. And I was an associate veterinarian at a general practice for about a year and a half. And then I became a relief veterinarian. So I basically, which in other parts of the world is called locum. And I don't know why in the United States we call it relief, but locum, same thing. So basically what I did was I hopped practice to practice, and I filled in when people were on vacation, or maybe they were off getting continuing education credits, or maybe on maternity leave or something like that. Or I would fill in when people were sick. And I did that with general practice, emergency practice. I worked at shelters. I did a little bit of mobile practice. So it just that's where I said in my bio that you read, I kind of made a career of being a professional sampler and just going and trying a lot of different things. And right now, I mean, it's a long, windy path. I could probably take the entire 30 minutes to do it, but I won't. So I took a very windy path to becoming from a relief vet to becoming an entrepreneur. I founded a company called Relief Rover to connect relief veterinarians to practices. And then that company was bought by a software company called Hound. And now I serve as their chief veterinary officer. So that took really almost 20 years, because this year I celebrate my 20 year graduation.
And I recently celebrated my 21st birthday. So,
Oh yeah.
so okay, moving on to the next question. I like to know what was the motivations for you to choose a veterinary medicine.
Well, I actually came to veterinary medicine a little bit later in life. I know that there is a common story in veterinary medicine where people have known since they were little kids that they wanted to be a vet. We always had pets growing up. I loved animals, but it never occurred to me, not for 1 second, that I would be a veterinarian. And so I initially had a career I got a degree in mass communications. So I ended up working at a corporate video production company, and then making like sales videos for different customers. And then I worked freelance on movies and TV and documentaries. And I just had this kind of sampling career. But then somewhere in my mid-20s, I decided that I did want to go to veterinary school. I started working at a veterinary practice, and I was volunteering at a marine mammal center in California. And that really made me feel like, you know what, I want to go into this field. So then I had to go back and take all the science classes that I had very successfully avoided in my undergraduate years. And I had to take all those science classes. So I took science classes, and then I started veterinary school at about 30 years old. So it was a second career for me. And, I've never looked back. I'm so in love with this profession and so proud to be a vet. I'm very glad that I did discover it, even if it was a little bit later.
Yeah, and how did you get into the field? In the field right now, you are working on as a chief veterinarian medicine. And was it your dream to always work on this field, or you kind of ended on in this field?
definitely just landed there. It would never have occurred to me, not once. So as maybe you can tell a little bit by my history, I'm not actually a huge planner. I'm not someone who has this long-term goal and I make a plan and I follow the steps to get there. I'm a little bit more of a wing it kind of a gal, and I will just take opportunities. I'll walk through open doors. I do like to have a little bit of autonomy. So I ended up in this role as a chief veterinary officer because I created Relief Rover. And I created Relief Rover because as a relief vet, I had been working as a relief vet for a really long time. And I looked around and I saw that this group of veterinarians who are very important to the health of our profession, there weren't a lot of resources for us. And so I wanted to create something. So rather than just say, oh gosh, there aren't the resources that I need, oh well, I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to create them then. And so I ended up spinning up Relief Rover. Now, I was working as a relief veterinarian, for the whole time I owned Relief Rover. And from the day it launched to the day it sold was almost 5 years to the day. And so all that time I was working as a relief vet. I still actually work as a relief vet. But so I never planned to become a chief veterinary officer. And to be honest, if you had said that to me, I would have been like, I have no idea what that means.
So, do you feel like this field is not sufficiently covered in a veterinary curriculum, or right? Like we are not being prepared to work in a veterinary officers as a veterinarian officers? And did you kind of had a mentor to on guide you on this path?
Yeah, no, I didn't learn. I mean, I'm trying to remember back. I certainly didn't learn. I didn't even know that something like a chief veterinary officer existed when I was in veterinary school. I wouldn't have known what that was. And frankly, I think when I was in veterinary school from 2000 to 2004, there probably weren't a lot of them. I'm sure there were some, but where that role really started to get a little more prominent, and there were more roles like that, was in the consolidation of veterinary practices. So that role, at least that I recognized it, kind of came out of when I started learning about chief veterinary officers. It was because there would be a corporate group that had a chief veterinary officer, and a lot of times, or sometimes called a chief medical officer. And a lot of times those people were responsible or are responsible for like all the doctors at all the hospitals and all the medical decisions that are made, and the quality of the medicine and things like that. That isn't at all what my role is. So my role as a chief veterinary officer is very different from that role because I work for a software company. And what we do is we build software to help solve problems for hospitals. So we don't own hospitals. We're not, I'm the only veterinarian on the team. So my role is to use my veterinary skills and my knowledge of the industry so that we can creating solutions to help hospitals solve. And our space is basically staffing and retention. So we work with the people part of the hospital. So we help hospitals find teams to help run their hospitals. So that's anybody from the receptionist to the assistant to the practice manager and to everyone in between, to the veterinarian. So we help them find team members. We help those team members learn things like, how do I find the right job? And then we also work in the relief space. So these are temporary workers, whether you're a veterinarian or a technician or a veterinary nurse. Then we help place people like that. And we also help with culture and retention. So we have software tools that help with culture and retention. So my job as a chief veterinary officer is to bring that veterinarian and perspective and that knowledge of how a hospital works to the problem of solving problems for these hospitals from a software perspective, if that makes sense. And for sure, no question, didn't learn a thing about it in veterinary school. And to answer your question about a mentor, there was no one specific mentor, but I will tell you that when I got into the entrepreneurial space, so when I went just from, not just, but because there's no just about it, working in clinical practice, when I went from working full time as a relief veterinarian in clinical practice to trying to build a company and learning about software and learning about how we can solve all these other problems, there were so many people in our profession that came forward to help me. So tons of people served as mentors for me in all the little pieces. So I learned about leadership skills here. I learned about software here. I learned about how to run a business here. I learned about how to lead teams, teams here, how to delegate. So all the things I just learned from tons and tons of people.
So we just entered into the soft skill. So I like to ask the next questions related to soft skill. Can you share some of the insights that you think that are the essential soft skills, so that kind of help you to excel in the role of chief veterinary officer?
Yeah, I think anytime you're in a leadership role, and veterinarians, whether you're in clinical practice, whether you're working for industry or in research, you're always going to have you're in a leadership role, or whether you're working relief. So having excellent communication skills, being able to clearly communicate your ideas is really, really important. I think having, being able to approach problems and approach people with curiosity, I think is also a really good soft skill to have. And you don't have to just have these skills. You can develop them. So if you feel like, oh gosh, I never even thought about what curiosity means or how do you approach something like that. These are skills that you can develop. I think also just being a good active listener, right? And instead of, and we all do it to some degree as we listen, and while we're listening, we're formulating what we're going to say next. Or maybe we already know what we're going to say next. And instead of listening really hard, we're kind of looking for our window to hop in with our next answer, right?
Yeah.
So active listening takes practice. You have to calm your mind down because it's going to want to do that. So you calm your mind down and you have to really listen and really take in what people are saying, because that is going to help you in your leadership skills, because you're going to be able to, you've got to make connections, right? And you have to really understand what are the different ideas that people are bringing to the table and help develop those ideas and help make connections. So those are some, I could go on and on listing soft skills, but those are some of the ones I can think of right now.
So I kind of believe that since you are working in a software field, like the problem solving skills is the one of the pivotal skills that might be required in your profession. So can you kind of provide an example of situation where you feel like problem solving skills were pivotal in addressing the challenges that you are facing within a team?
Yeah, I feel so. You're always, so when you're leading a team, whether you're leading a team in a clinic or in some other kind of business setting, you're going to have a lot of different stakeholders, right? And all those stakeholders are not necessarily going to be lined up in how they see the problem that you're trying to solve. And one of your goals as a leader and a problem solver is I think one of the misconceptions about leadership is that you are the one that has to solve all the problems and you are the one that needs all the answers. But that's not actually true at all. None of us can have all the skills that we need to, execute on a mission and a vision and bring care to animals or public health or whatever. Nobody can do it alone. And I think good leaders that are good at problem solving use those soft skills, those active listening skills, that curiosity, those observational skills, to try to make connections with the stakeholders and see, how can I bring those stakeholders together? How can I inspire those all of the people on my team to work effectively towards a goal and help solve the problems, right? So I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway for me, is that, as a leader, you don't have to solve all the problems. You have to find the people to solve the problems, and you have to create a pathway where they can think creatively and where they have a safe space to be solving the problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that point. Or like when I stepped in a role of IVSA, like I used to think that, okay, since I am in the role, like I need to be the one taking up the leadership skills and doing the tasks on. But later on, being in this role kind of made me realize that, okay, this is a role main focusing on executing a team rather than doing it by own self. So I completely agree on whatever you said. So, as a chief veterinarian officer, I believe that you might require to be updated with the advancement within a veterinary field. So, and also with the rules and regulations, since the software field and the AI field is right now it's growing field. So, how do you do that?
So, like any other veterinarian in the United States and other countries as well, like I have to keep up with so much continuing education in order to keep my license. And in the United States, there's different states have different criteria for how to keep up your licensing. So I'm currently licensed in both Florida and California. So I have to keep up my continuing education. So how I do that is I go to conferences, and in fact, I'm going to a conference next week and to gain those skills. But I don't leave it there. It's not just about getting continuing education skills for myself. There's so many resources. In fact, it's like a fire hose of resources. You can't possibly ingest all of the information that's coming at us. But I try to keep up with reading, or from our AVMA and from our international organizations as well, and try like newsletters that I get to try to keep up with what is going on in our profession. And I think truly a stressor for veterinarians, and particularly new veterinarians. I used to feel this way all the time. I would get the journals, and they would pile up on my desk, and I would feel like I'd want so badly to read them all, and like,
Yeah.
Take all that knowledge in and understand it, but there's not time. And so you have to kind of let go, because you become a good skimmer, right? And then when there's something that really grabs your attention or is really relevant to a case that you're working on or a problem you're trying to solve, that's when you can dive a little deeper. But, so I try to keep up as best I can through formal continuing education, and also just reading journals and newsletters and things like that.
Yeah, I completely agree in the journal part, because I also kind of collect a huge some of journals whenever I travel or whenever I found them, but they are just in my rack. Like I'm not able to read them every time. And so moving on to the next question, right now the veterinary field is evolving, and the people's working in a veterinarian field right now, they don't want to just be a clinicians or work in a research field. Like they do know that executing a plan or working in an office is also important. So how can a student gain in the most of the experience in your field, and what would you say to those who looks career in your field as like being as a chief veterinarian officers?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that this is one of the cool things about being a vet right now is there are so many opportunities to use your veterinary education. And veterinary educations are much, much broader than, like, they teach you skills, I think, that go beyond what most veterinarians think when you first start out. So certainly you're learning the medicine, right? You're learning the pathophysiology, you're learning, how to make a differential list, you're learning about treatment options and how all those things work. And those are all really important skills. But if you break down kind of what you're doing there, is you're having problem solving skills, and you're learning how to make connections,
Yep.
right? And a lot of times with veterinarians, we're having to figure things out. We're having to extrapolate, well, this worked in this case in this species. I don't have an exact recipe for how to treat a similar case in this species, but I'm going to kind of extrapolate. And we do that all the time, whether we're fixing trauma or whether we're, working on an internal medicine case. Those skills, making connections like that, and communication skills, right? Like veterinary medicine is a team sport, and the ability to effectively communicate with your team to save the life of an animal, work on an animal, that communication, that problem solving skills, those making connections, all of that can translate very, very well into jobs in industry, in business and things like that. So I think veterinarians are poised to take a lot of different paths if they choose to. And as far as like how to do that, because a lot of times there isn't formal education around it. There are some veterinary schools I know in the United States that offer programs where you can get a veterinary degree and an MBA, so Master's of Business Administration at the same time. So you're learning these business skills. And I know that, there's public health and, and veterinary degrees. But I think my main piece of advice, if you're not in one of those programs or don't want to do one of those programs, is always keep your mind open. Keep your mind open, meet people. Don't be afraid to meet as many people as you can and introduce yourself and be a networker, because that is when nobody's going to teach you in veterinary school. There's no list, right? That these are all your options, and then you pick an option and these are the steps that you take to get there. That doesn't exist. It's much more fluid than that. So I just, take opportunities, take risks, do things like, like you said, you took on this role with IVSA, and that is, you kind of took a risk. You're like, well, I'm not sure exactly what this role is going to be like, and I don't know what I need to do. Just continue to do those things. Stretch yourself, get outside of your comfort zone, meet people. That is how you end up building a veterinary career that is incredibly enriching and is incredibly useful to our world and serving the people and animals of our world. But that's how you do it.
So moving on to the last questions of our Veterinary Profession Podcast, I like to ask, like, what would you say if you could go back in a time and give advice to the younger self of yourself?
I think I would tell myself, don't stress, don't sweat the small stuff, and don't worry about knowing. It's not about knowing. It's about learning. It's about having an open mind. It's not about gaining this knowledge and then shoving it all in there and just keeping it, right? It is about, I would tell myself not to be so afraid of being wrong. I was, very afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid of being wrong. Be open, be curious. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid to feel uncomfortable, to feel embarrassed. Because if you can let go of some of that stuff, it's not that you won't feel it, right? You might feel embarrassed when you get it wrong, but it's that you can sit with it and you can allow it to happen, because you will learn so much more if you can take on that mindset of curiosity, let your ego go, don't worry about being right, and just concentrate on learning. There's so much to learn. And I would tell myself, don't be afraid to take risks and take on some activities that maybe, you feel like you don't know what to do, like a leadership role with an organization, right? Something like that. Like, don't worry that you don't know how to do it. Just do it.
Well, this veterinary profession podcast was really interesting for me. Like your journey is quite of inspiring for me, and I believe that this will be inspiring for the viewers. And I believe that we can get connected more in the futures, and we can do such kind of interactions within an IVSA. And you saying that I like to in this podcast. See you soon in the future.
Well, I look forward to staying in touch, and I am an open book. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I don't know if you, have podcast notes or whatever, but, feel free to share my email address. I'm happy to be a resource for anyone and answer any questions that I can. I don't always know the answer, but if I don't know it, I'll make it up or or try to lead people in the right direction.
See you. Bye.
Okay, thank